The crystal glasses gave off a thin little ring as someone laughed too loudly, and the smell of seared steak and red wine still hung over the table when a guest squinted at Yolanda and said, "Wait, aren't you the grinder woman from the market?" For half a second, nobody moved. Yolanda felt Daniel's hand go stiff beside hers. She still had a faint trace of metal dust under one thumbnail, even after scrubbing twice before coming to his firm's anniversary dinner. The guest smiled like he'd made a pleasant discovery. "You sharpen knives, right? My brother took his shears to you once, said you were the best." Yolanda opened her mouth, but Daniel got there first. "Oh no," he said with a tight laugh, lifting his glass. "She's not some professional. She just plays with a whetstone now and then." He said it lightly, like a joke, but not lightly enough. "You know how people get into little hobbies." Little hobbies. The words landed harder than if he'd raised his voice. Across the white tablecloth, someone looked down at their plate. Someone else smiled the way people do when they're uncomfortable and don't want to be caught choosing sides. Yolanda sat very still. She could hear the band in the corner, the clink of forks, the soft drag of a chair leg on polished floor, and under all of it, her own shame rising hot in her throat. Daniel kept talking, too smooth now, too fast, but the guest was still looking at her, confused, because he knew what Daniel was pretending not to know. And that was only the beginning. If stories about grit, dignity, and quiet comeback speak to you, subscribe and stay with me. The ride home was so quiet that Yolanda could hear the turn signal ticking like a tiny clock between them. Daniel kept both hands on the wheel. His jaw was tight, his collar still smelling faintly of cologne and restaurant smoke. She sat with her purse on her lap, fingers pressed against the worn leather strap, feeling the rough line on her thumb where a blade had nicked her the week before. At the third red light, he finally spoke. "You embarrassed me tonight." Yolanda turned to him slowly. "I embarrassed you?" "Don't do that," he snapped. "You know what I mean. I work too hard to be laughed at by people from my own firm because my wife stands out there sharpening scissors and kitchen knives." He let out a breath through his nose. It sounds ridiculous when they say it out loud. She looked out the window at the dark storefront glass sliding by. It only sounds ridiculous to someone who thinks a desk makes him cleaner than a pair of hands. That hit him. By the time they got home, the words were coming faster. In the apartment, under the yellow kitchen light, he said she smelled like oil, stone slurry, and steel. Said he was tired of pretending her trade was temporary. Said if she wanted to keep playing grinder woman, she could do it somewhere else. Yolanda went very still. Sometimes people go still because something inside them has just locked into place. She took off her earrings, set them in a dish by the sink, and asked in a quiet voice, "Are you telling me to choose?" Daniel didn't look away, and that was when she understood she would not be sleeping there much longer. By sunrise, the apartment sounded different, not louder, emptier, a zipper closing, a drawer sliding shut, the soft knock of metal tools laid carefully into a canvas roll. Yolanda packed only what belonged to her, without argument. 2 changes of clothes, her aprons, the small tin of oil she used on hinges and shears, and the stones she had bought one by one over the years. Daniel stayed in the bedroom. He did not come out to stop her. She stood in the kitchen one last moment, looking at the coffee mug with the chipped rim, the fruit bowl, the clean counter under that same yellow light. Strange, isn't it? A home can look exactly the same and already not be yours. The morning air outside was cold enough to sting her nose. She loaded her things into the back of a rideshare and gave the driver an address she knew by heart: Mr. Sato's workshop. If there was one place in the world where the smell of wet stone, machine oil, and steel soot could settle her breathing, it was there. Mr. Sato had taught her years ago, when most people thought sharpening was old-fashioned work, and she was still learning how to hold a blade at the right angle without rushing. In his shop, every sound meant something. The hush of water over stone, the whisper of edge against leather, the steady turn of the pedal-driven grinding wheel in the corner. But when Yolanda pushed open the door that morning, she stopped. The wheel was still, and Mr. Sato, sitting on his stool with both hands folded, looked up at her as if he had been expecting this exact day. She set her bag down by the door and tried to smile, but Mr. Sato had already seen enough. He did not ask the kind of questions people ask when they want the story before they offer kindness. He just reached for the kettle, poured hot water into 2 small cups, and let the steam rise between them. The shop smelled of damp stone and old cedar shelves. Yolanda wrapped both hands around the cup, and only then did she realize how cold she had been. "I am retiring," he said after a long, quiet moment. She looked up too fast. "No." A soft smile touched his face, but it didn't quite hide the tiredness in it. He lifted one hand, and she noticed the tremor for the first time. Tiny, but enough. Enough for a man like him to know what it meant. "A blade tells the truth," he said. "If the hand changes, the work changes." Yolanda swallowed hard. The room felt smaller all at once. The bench, the hanging tools, the whetstone trays, the old lamp over the work table, all of it suddenly looked like something about to become memory. Then Mr. Sato leaned down beside his stool and pulled out a long wooden box wrapped in a faded cloth. He set it on the table between them with both hands. Inside, nested one by one, lay his Japanese water stones, worn smooth at the edges, darkened by years of use, each one carrying the shape of a lifetime. Yolanda stared at them, then at him. "No, those are yours." Mr. Sato shook his head. "Not anymore." And when he pushed the box toward her, she understood he was giving her much more than tools. For a moment, Yolanda could not even touch the box. The stones seemed to hold their own weather, cool, damp, faintly gritty, carrying that clean mineral smell that rises when water hits a well-used surface. She knew each one by sight, even if she had never imagined they would be hers. Mr. Sato had guarded them for years, the way some people guard jewelry or deeds. To him, they were time made solid. "I can't take this," she whispered. "You can," he said, "and you must." Then he told her what he had been thinking for months. Standing in one place all day, waiting for passersby to bring dull blades, would keep her fed. Maybe. But it would also keep her small. Kitchens, barbers, gardeners, tailors, they all needed their tools kept true, and most of them didn't have time to chase a sharpener across town. "Go to the work," he said, tapping the edge of the wooden box. "If the hands are good, the road will find them." That sentence stayed with her. By afternoon, Yolanda was walking a used vehicle lot with grease on the ground and paper flags snapping in the wind. She passed shiny cars she couldn't afford and stopped in front of an old compact van with faded paint, a dented side panel, and just enough room in the back for a bench, a water tray, and her rolls of tools. The seat fabric smelled like dust and sun. She pressed her palm against the metal side and looked at the empty cargo space. It was ugly. It was tired. And somehow, she could already see exactly what it wanted to become. Once she bought it, the real work began. The van had a sour smell of old fabric and hot plastic, and the floor and back was scratched raw from years of hauling somebody else's mess. Yolanda spent her mornings wiping it down, tightening loose panels, measuring the narrow cargo space with a tape that kept snapping back against her wrist. By evening, her fingers were dusty with sawdust and stained with sealant. She built a small workbench against one wall added hooks for tool rolls, and set a shallow water tray where the stones could sit without sliding. It was not pretty at first, but little by little, that tired shell became a fitted, mobile workshop van. Mr. Sato came by once, moving slower than before, and stood outside while she showed him the layout. He nodded at the bench, the lamp, the towel rack, the crate for tagged orders. "Good," he said. Then he pointed to the empty side panel. "Leave room there. Work grows if the hands stay faithful." Those words stayed with her while she tested her route. She learned which alleys behind restaurants smelled of garlic and bleach before lunch service, which barbershops opened early, which tailors kept a coffee can of tired scissors under the counter. Most people said, maybe later. Some didn't even look up. Then, just before noon, she stopped behind a narrow kitchen door where steam rolled out into the alley, carrying the smell of onions and hot butter. A cook in a stained apron glanced at her sign, frowned, and said, "Chef doesn't trust anybody with her knives." Yolanda lifted her case and answered, "Then let her watch." The cook gave her a look that said he expected this to go badly. A minute later, the chef came out anyway. Her name was Mara Quinn, and she carried one long prep knife wrapped in a folded side towel the way some people carry fragile glass. Steam drifted around her from the kitchen. Butter, stock, singed garlic, the whole back door breathed heat. Mara did not bother with small talk. "You get one knife," she said. "If you ruin the edge, you buy the blade." Yolanda only nodded. She sat up on the narrow bench just inside the van, laid the knife flat in her palm, and ran her thumb near the edge without touching it. Dull. Dragging. Tired from too much board contact and too little care. She asked one question. "Herbs or proteins?" And Mara's eyes narrowed, just a little, because that was not what amateurs asked. Then came the sound. Water on stone. Steel moving in steady passes. Not rushed, not showy. Yolanda worked like she always had, listening more than performing. Even in a tight alley with a cook watching and a chef ready to pounce, her hands stayed calm. When she finished, she wiped the blade, handed it back, and stepped aside. Mara tested it on a tomato first, then on chives. The blade fell through both with almost no pressure. The cook let out a soft, surprised laugh. Mara looked at the knife, then at Yolanda. "Wait here," she said, and disappeared back into the kitchen. When she returned, she was carrying 6 knives. From that day on, Mara Quinn stopped being just a difficult first customer. She became the kind of name that opens other doors. The 6 knives turned into a weekly stop. Then the pastry station sent out its own long slicers. Then a prep cook whispered Yolanda's number to a friend in another kitchen. That is how good work travels. Quietly at first, with one chef saying to another, "Don't let anybody else touch your blades." Soon, her mornings had a shape to them. She would pull the van into alleys still damp from hosed-down mats, with the smell of yeast from bakeries, fish from delivery crates, coffee from staff mugs balanced on milk cartons. She tagged each bundle by hand, wrapped handles in towels, made notes on steel type, edge angle, and who liked a little more bite for tomatoes or herbs. Restaurant chefs' knives were never just knives to the people who used them every day. They were rhythm, speed, muscle memory, and they began to trust her. Mr. Sato was right. Once she started going where the work lived, the road answered back. A butcher asked about cleavers. A salon owner brought shears. A groundskeeper waved her over for pruning blades. By the end of the month, Yolanda wasn't waiting for customers to notice her. She was running standing rounds. But success has its own weight. And if you've ever built something with your hands, you know this part. The part where being needed starts to look a lot like being stretched too thin. One evening, with 3 missed calls on her phone and 2 more kitchens asking for a slot, Yolanda stared at her route book and realized she had reached the edge of what one pair of hands could do. That was the first week Yolanda understood that growth can feel a lot like panic. Her route book was full of pencil marks, crossed out times, names of kitchens, barbers, and one bakery that insisted on dawn pickups only. She began waking before the alarm, hearing imagined phone vibrations that weren't there. In the van, damp towels never seemed to dry fast enough. Her wrists ached by evening. Even good work can start to fray if a person is always hurrying, and she knew it. Mr. Sato noticed before she said a word. He watched her finish a blade one afternoon, then reached out and tapped the spine gently. "Still sharp," he said, "but you are leaning on speed now." He let that sit between them a moment. Do not grow careless just because people finally see you. That same week, Mara introduced her to a young culinary student named Nina, a quiet woman with observant eyes and burn marks on two knuckles from kitchen work. Nina had been asking questions for months, apparently, about edge angles, stone grit, why some chefs wrap their own knives like sleeping children. Yolanda almost laughed at that image. Almost. She did not need charm. She needed steadiness. So she let Nina start small. Tags, towels, intake notes, careful handling. No sharpening yet. You watch first, Yolanda told her. Hands come later. Nina nodded like someone receiving something serious. And then, late one afternoon, while Yolanda was closing the van doors after a long route, she looked up across the street and saw Daniel standing outside a cafe, staring at the business name painted on her side panel. He did not cross the street. That was the strange part. Daniel just stood there with one hand in his coat pocket, looking at the painted letters on the van as if he were trying to match them to the woman he used to know. The late light caught the window behind him, and for a second, his reflection sat on top of his face, making him look older, less certain. Yolanda held the rear door with one hand and said nothing. Nina glanced between them, picked up on the tension at once, and quietly took the tagged bundles inside the van to give her space. That small kindness told Yolanda she had chosen well. Daniel finally stepped forward, but only far enough to be heard. "So it's really yours," he said. Not hello or how are you, just that. Yolanda wiped her hands on a towel. Yes. His eyes moved over the shelves, the bench, the neatly wrapped orders. I didn't realize it had become this. There are moments when a person wants to say everything they carried through the dark months. About the dinner, about the apartment, about being looked down on for work that fed her, steadied her, remade her. But she didn't give him any of that. Some truths don't need to be argued anymore once they are standing in plain sight. "I have a route to finish," she said. Daniel nodded, almost like someone who had come to the wrong door and knew it. Right. He stepped back. She closed the van. That night, after her last stop, Yolanda found a heavy cream envelope tucked under the wiper blade. Her name written across the front in careful black ink, and in the upper corner, a seal from the Culinary Guild. She did not open the envelope in the parking lot. Yolanda waited until she was home, after she had washed the stone slurry from her hands and set the kettle on. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind that makes a soft crackle when you break the seal. Nina was still there, helping sort tags for the next morning, and looked up the moment Yolanda unfolded the letter. Her eyes moved once across the page. Then again, slower. "What is it?" Nina asked. Yolanda let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "It's an invitation. Not to sell outside a service entrance, not to stand in a corner with her van while other people got introduced properly. The Culinary Guild was inviting her to its annual gala as an honoree, recognized for preserving blade care, serving professional kitchens, and becoming, in their words, the city's master sharpener." For a second, she almost laughed, because life can be strange that way. One person calls your work a hobby, and somewhere else, People who live by that same work call it mastery. Mr. Sato read the letter the next day with his glasses low on his nose. His hands were unsteady, but his voice was not. "You will go," he said. "I don't belong in rooms like that," Yolanda answered. He folded the letter carefully. "That room belongs to whoever earned a place in it." Mara offered to lend her a dark, tailored jacket. Nina asked if she should polish the display case. Even the van seemed to hum differently on the route that week. And then the night of the gala arrived, with warm lights, pressed linen, polished silver, and one face in the crowd Yolanda had not been told to expect. She saw Daniel before he saw her. He was seated at one of the round tables on the main floor, shoulders a little tighter than they used to be, turning a water glass slowly between his fingers. The room glowed gold around him. Linen, candles, polished cutlery, quiet talk, the soft sweep of servers moving between tables. For one brief second, Yolanda felt that old heat rise in her chest. Just the memory of being made small in a room full of well-dressed people. Then Mara touched her elbow. "You're not here by mistake," she said. That helped more than she knew. Inside the hall, faces kept turning toward Yolanda, but not with pity and not with that polite curiosity she had seen at Daniel's dinner. These were people who knew what her work meant. A pastry chef thanked her for restoring a delicate slicing edge. A butcher grinned and said his staff refused to let anyone else near their blades now. One owner mentioned her standing rounds like they were already part of the city's kitchen rhythm. And near the front sat Mr. Sato, smaller than he once was, but straight-backed, wearing a dark jacket Nina had helped brush clean that afternoon. When Yolanda met his eyes, he gave the tiniest nod. That was enough to steady her breathing. Still, when the program began and names were called, her palms went damp. She could hear the low hum of voices, the clink of glassware, the soft rustle of people settling in. Somewhere below, Daniel finally looked up and saw her standing near the side of the stage. Then the announcer smiled toward the crowd, lifted the card in hand, and said, "Tonight, we honor the woman many of our finest kitchens trust above all others." Yolanda walked to the stage with her back straight, though her heartbeat was loud enough she could feel it in her throat. The lights were warmer up there, brighter too. For a moment, she could not see the whole room, only shapes beyond the glare, white tablecloths, raised faces, the silver edge of serving trays. Then her eyes adjusted, and she saw them. Mara near the front, Nina leaning forward in her seat, Mr. Sato sitting still, both hands over his cane, and farther back, Daniel, watching without anywhere to hide his expression. The presenter spoke about service, trust, and the rare kind of craft people only notice when it is missing. Then the award was placed in Yolanda's hands. It was heavier than she expected. When she stepped to the microphone, the room went so quiet she could hear a glass being set down somewhere near the back. Yolanda looked at the crowd and did not rush. "I work on edges," she said softly. But this was never only about knives. A few people smiled. She thanked the kitchens that had trusted her when all she had was skill, a used van, and a reason to keep going. She thanked the workers whose tools never make it into speeches, the cooks, barbers, gardeners, and tailors who know that good hands deserve good instruments. Then she turned toward Mr. Sato. "And I thank the man who taught me that respect belongs first to the work, and then to the person doing it." That line landed. Her last words were even quieter. No task that feeds people and serves people should ever be spoken of with contempt. The applause rose fast after that. And when the program ended, with people standing and reaching for her hand, Yolanda looked toward the ballroom doors and saw Daniel already waiting there for her. By the doors, Daniel looked like a man who had rehearsed his words and still didn't trust them. "I was wrong," he said, before she could speak. No smile, no polished tone. "About the business. About you. About what I thought mattered." His eyes dropped for a second. "I was ashamed of the wrong thing." Yolanda stood with the award tucked lightly against her side. Around them, the ballroom was thinning out, chairs scraping softly, glasses being gathered, the last warm smell of coffee and roasted meat hanging in the air. She listened all the way through. That mattered. Some people cut a person off because they're angry. She didn't need to. When he finally asked, quiet as a bruise, "Is there any chance for us?" she answered just as quietly, "No, Daniel. Just true. Not cruel, not soft enough to be mistaken." "I hope you become better from this," she said. "But you won't do it beside me." He nodded once. That was all. Then he stepped aside, and Yolanda walked back toward the people who had stood with her when standing cost something. Near the front, Nina was helping Mr. Sato with his coat. Yolanda opened the wooden box and took out the oldest stone, the smallest one, worn low from years of patient hands. She placed it in Nina's palms. "Keep it wet. Keep it level. Don't rush the edge." Some things become precious because they survive being used well. Outside, the night air felt cool and clean. In the parking lot, the van waited under the lamps, quiet and ready for morning. If this story stayed with you, leave a word for Yolanda in the comments, and pass it on to someone building their life by hand.